His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Charya, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavandam Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Glories to Sri Guru and Sri Garanga.
Hare
Nam Budaya Krishna Krishna Vipulai Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Kina. Nam Shesha Shanavadi Paschadadi Shatarini. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 From Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, the creation, Chapter 1, the first step in God realization, text 18. Niyached vishaye byokshan manasa buddhisarati manakarma bir akshiptam subharte darayadya. Niyached vishaye byokshan manasa buddhisarati manakarma bir akshiptam Shubharte darayadya. Niyached vishaye byokshan manasa buddhisarati manakarma birakshiptam shubharte darayadya. Everyone can chant, please.
Niyached Vishayabhyokshan Manasa Buddhi Saradhi Mana Karmabhir Akshiptam Subharte Dharayatiya. Hare Krishna.
Niyached Vishayebhyokshan Manasa Buddhi Sarati Mana Karma Bhirakshiptam Subharte Dharayedhiya.
Hare Krishna. Niyached Vishayebhyo Shan Manasa Buddhi Saratihi Mana Karambhir Akshiptam Subharte Dharayedhiya.
Anyone else? Okay, word for word translation. Niyachet, withdraw. Vishayebhya, from sense engagements. Akshan, the senses. Manasa, by dint of the mind. Buddhi, intelligence. Sarati, driver. Mana, the mind. Karmabhi, by the fruits of work. Akshiptam, being absorbed in. Shubha arte, for the sake of the Lord. Dharayet, hold up. Diya, in full consciousness. Translation. Gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The first process of spiritualizing the mind by mechanical chanting of the pranava omkara and by control of the breathing system is technically called the mystic or yogic process of pranayama, or fully controlling the breathing air. The ultimate state of this pranayama system is to be fixed in trance, technically called samadhi. But experience has proven that even the samadhi stage also fails to control the materially absorbed mind. For example, the great mystic Vishwamitra Muni, even in the stage of samadhi, became a victim of the senses and cohabited with Menaka. History has already recorded this. The mind, although ceasing to think of sensual activities at present, remembers past sensual activities from the subconscious status and thus disturbs one from 100% engagement in self-realization. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami recommends the next stage of assured policy, namely to fix one's mind in the service of the personality of Godhead. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, also recommends this direct process in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text 47. Thus, the mind being spiritually cleansed, one should at once engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord by the different devotional activities of hearing, chanting, etc. If performed under proper guidance, that is the surest path of progress, even for the disturbed mind. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschita Deshatarine Niyached Vishaye Byokshan Manasa Buddhisarati Manakarma Birakshiptam Shubharte Darayedya. Gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. Very interesting segment of verses that we've been covering since the beginning of this chapter. Some of it has been stated explicitly in the verses and in Prabhupada's purports, just like today he's talking about the process of pranayam. And sometimes it's implicit in what's being said. And the full gist of it I got from, was explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his purports, how Shukadeva Goswami is describing and propounding the system of devotional service, especially hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, but he's analyzing it in terms of the mystic yoga system, in terms of the Ashtanga yoga system, which I found very interesting. And many spiritualists and real spiritualists, and in the present day, mostly so-called spiritualists, pseudo-spiritualists, they like this idea of yoga, whether it's exercises or breathing exercises or even some kind of meditation, but they very much like this divorced from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like I'll tell one brief story that I told last week in the Krishna House class, that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was touring India, And he came to one place, and one Brahmana, by seeing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and by the influence and preaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he became a devotee and was completely devoted to Krishna and completely absorbed in chanting the holy name. And he happened to attend, thinking to tell people about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He attended one meeting of Mayavadi sannyasis headed by Prakashananda Saraswati. And he told them, oh, this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's here. He appears to be the Supreme Lord himself. He's preaching the holy name, and he's so beautiful and qualified in every way you should follow. And Prakashananda was saying, oh, yes, I've heard of this Chaitanya. He wouldn't call him Krishna Chaitanya. He just called him Chaitanya. I've heard of this Chaitanya. He's a sentimentalist. He doesn't really study Vedanta. He's just sentimental. Maybe he has some magic power or some hypnosis power that he's able to convince people or bewilder people into chanting. And he's a disciple of Kesava Bharati. So that's not a very elevated line of, sannyasis. So Prakashananda was speaking ill of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not giving him much credit. But he was saying Chaitanya, and he was saying Atma, and he was saying Brahman in talking about his philosophy. So that Brahmana devotee was very sad. He was a new devotee, so maybe he wasn't fully learned in all the Shastras and all the intricacies of philosophy yet. So he wasn't able to convince the Mayavadis. And we know also in Nectar of Devotion and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that there's different stages of those who are qualified to take up sadhana bhakti. The lowest stage has very weak faith and very weak knowledge. This means if the faith is weak and the knowledge is weak, they have a little faith, a little knowledge, so they're qualified to take up sadhana bhakti. This is the Kanishta Adhikari. So they're qualified, but without the faith and without the strong faith and the strong knowledge, they can very easily be diverted. Now, this Brahmana, his faith in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very strong, but his knowledge was not very well developed. So in that stage, that's the Madhyama Adhikari, the medium qualified person. His faith is strong. He can't be diverted from Krishna consciousness, but he's not always able to offer arguments and philosophy and Shastra and reason to support it. So because of that, he felt very sad, and he went back to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and explained the situation to him. And he said, yes, these impersonalists, they called you Chaitanya, but not once did I hear the name Krishna from their mouth. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, yes, they like to chant. They like to say Chaitanya. Chaitanya means the life force or the living force. So they like to say Chaitanya. They like to talk about Atma. They like to talk about Brahman. They like to chant Omkara. But the name of Krishna himself will never pass their lips. So anyway, these are the pseudo-spiritualists who have some idea of spirituality, even Vedic spirituality, but neglect Krishna. And the point of these verses that we've been reading is that these people do not have a monopoly on these Vedic philosophies. They don't own the concept of Vedanta or the concept of yoga or all these different things. And therefore, Shukadev Goswami is using these yogic concepts to explain devotional service. And elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, also this paradigm of Ashtanga Yoga is used. In Bhagavad Gita, of course, there's the whole 6th chapter, just like we did the whole 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita in the Sunday feast lecture. But no one came to the conclusion that, we should sit down in the forest and meditate. Rather, it's using the Vedic paradigm, but the conclusion is always devotional service to Krishna. And Prabhupada, in today's purport, he references that idea in 647, Yogi Namapi Sarvesham Madgiten Antaratmanam, that the best yogi of all is the devotee, the one whose faith is specifically in Krishna himself, not the one who can twist his body into shapes or hold his breath or any of these things, or even meditate. Prabhupada said even coming to samadhi is not an ultimate qualification. And he gives the example of Vishwamitra, who attained samadhi but then fell down. So how is Shukadev Goswami explaining this? So let's, I wanted to review a little bit. If we go back a couple of verses to text 16, we see, let's see, text 16, Grihat Pravajito Dira. Grihat Pravajito Dira means give up home, leave home. So what does this mean, leaving home? Leaving home means taking up the practice of brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is the most important element of the Ashtanga yogic process of yam. We know these Ashtanga yoga, yam, niyam, pranayam, asan. We'll get to all of those. But the first one, yam, means restrictions. So here, grihat pravajito dira, this is a restriction that you take up brahmacharya, you leave aside family life, you leave aside material attachments. This is emblematic of the process of yam, or restrictions. What are the other ones? Ahimsa, non-violence, not stealing, not lying. Maybe there's more, I can't remember all of them. So this is the beginning of the process of devotional service. Shukadev Goswami is saying, take up yam, these restrictions, and become dhira. This is also interesting, to become dhira. Just like if we remember back a couple of months to the deliverance of Dhritarashtra by his brother Vidura. And there, because Dhritarashtra, because of his offenses, he was not able to take up directly to the life of devotional service. He was only really able to take up the yogic process. He was too offensive to worship Krishna. So, and Prabhupada explains, by this process of yam niyam and going to the forest, he could only attain the stage of dhira, of being self-controlled, but he could not attain the stage of becoming narottama, or the best person, which is the stage of devotional service. So therefore, Shukadev Goswami is saying, grihat pravajito dhira, become a dhira by taking up this process of restriction, of giving up, give up family life, give up home life, become brahmachari. Next is punya tirtha jala pluta, bathing in the holy rivers. Go and bathe in the holy rivers. These are the yama, are the negative restrictions. Don't do something. Don't be a householder, become brahmachari. Don't steal, don't commit violence. The next is niyam, which are positive injunctions. One of those is shocham, cleanliness. So cleanliness means taking regular bath. So he's saying, bathe in the water of the holy places, which cleanses your body externally and also cleanses you internally, because they're a holy place. So this is the process of niyama, that you become clean, you become austere, like that. These are the qualities. So in this section, yam and niyam of the Ashtanga yoga system are being, if not directly mentioned, at least alluded to. And then it goes on, shucho vivikta asino, find a clean, purified place to sit down, asina, to make your asan, vidivat kalpatasane, and according to the rules and regulations, you sit down on that seat. So sitting down on the seat, finding an asan, this is the process of asan, of the Ashtanga yoga system. And even at kalpitasane, vidivat, it's done according to vidi. So you're doing the yam and the yam, these are the vidi, and then you progress to the stage of asan. And it's actually quite interesting, in Patanjali's yoga system, asan is there, but there's no description of any particular asanas in the works, in the writings of Patanjali. There's I don't even know them. I just know the lotus position, but there's so many others. If you do yoga today, there's like hundreds, thousands, millions of different asanas, but none of those were given by Patanjali. All he says, what does he say about asan? He says that it should be stira sukama asana. Stira sukama asana. This is from his Yoga Sutras, which means that you should sit firmly, not moving, and sukama, in a comfortable position. because the goal is not twisting your body. The goal is not stretching. The goal is not even good physical health, which may or may not be a benefit of doing yogas, the modern day or the subsequent yoga asanas. But what's the purpose of it? It's to facilitate the advancement of meditation through the stages. Therefore, this is the only asana necessary. You sit still, firmly in a purified seat, and you reduce your bodily movements, and in a comfortable position. So you sit comfortably. So you sit, what is it? Prabhupada said he's chanting japa and he goes, sit properly. So that's basically what Patanjali is saying. You sit properly. You sit still in a comfortable position. And this is asana. And this is useful. That will enable you to progress a little bit more. First, you follow the rules and the regulations, the do's and don'ts. Then you sit properly. This is asana. And then next, we heard in yesterday's shloka, Mother Vrindavaneshwari very nicely explained about the meaning and the import of this omkara. But specifically, this verse is saying that this chanting this mantra is pranayam. It's controlling the breath. Abhyasan manasa shudham. You sit in that manner. So abhyasam manasa, you sit quietly like that, and you still your mind and you engage your mind. You purify your mind. How? Shrivrit Brahmaksharam, by chanting this omkara. Mano yached jita shwaso. In this way, your mind becomes controlled, and jita swaso, your breath becomes controlled. So pranayama is another stage after asana, controlling the breath. And that also, Patanjali only gave very summary instructions of what this breathing is. He said, let's see if I could find that. Prashwasa gati vicheda. All he says about pranayam is that you separate your ingoing breath from your outgoing breath. It just means you breathe in, maybe you pause a little bit, and you breathe out. It's not like some complicated thing that you breathe in to a count of 5 and you hold it to a count of 8 and you breathe out to a count of 3 and you breathe in through this nostril and breathe out through that nostril and then this. And no, he kept it, again, simple, because the process was just recognizing and controlling and becoming aware of the breath as a means of progressing in the yoga system, which is a process of controlling the mind. So that's that system, that pranayama system is purified here. Shukadeva Goswami is suggesting that you do that by chanting Omkar. And Prabhupada also explains that even better than chanting Omkar, you do that by chanting Hare Krishna. So let's see. So all these things, again, Bhagavad Gita also describes the yogic system. Bhagavad Gita says, Sucho deshe pratishtapya, sthiramasanam atmana. The same thing, sthiramasanam, that you sit in a unmoving and fixed way at Shucho Desh, in a holy place, in a clean place, in a proper place, pratishtapya, and you establish yourself very firmly there. Sthiram asanam atmana, in a fixed seat, very firmly sitting like that. And again, controlling the breath, same thing. Simple process, whether by doing the breathing exercises or by chanting mantras. In the 4th canto, Prabhupada talks a little bit more about pranayama. He says, the word pranayama is very important in this verse because hatha yogis and ashtanga yogis practice pranayama. But generally, they do not know the purpose behind it. The purpose of pranayama or mystic yoga is to stop the mind and senses from engaging in fruitive activities. The so-called yogis who practice in Western countries have no idea of this. The aim of pranayama is not to make the body strong and fit for working hard. The aim is worship of Krishna. As far as pranayama is concerned, chanting of the holy name of the Lord and dancing in ecstasy are also considered pranayama. So this is the best pranayama. We're not bereft of pranayama by taking up Krishna consciousness. We're not bereft of the benefits of the mystic yogic system. We also have our yam and niyam. Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness is very simple. We have 4 no's: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. 4 no's and 1 yes. Chant Hare Krishna. So we also have our yam and niyam. We sit down and chant japa. This is our asana in some comfortable seat. We have our pranayam through japa and through kirtan, which automatically take care of all of this. And because we understand the purpose of it, therefore we're able to take the best benefit of it. Krishna, when he was preaching karma mimamsa philosophy to his father, he said, if you undergo some practice, but you don't understand the purpose of it, you'll never get the full benefit. So these yogis, they actually don't so-called yogis, they actually don't understand the purpose of yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, and moving on, dharana, all the pratyahara and dharana, which we'll come to. They don't know the purpose, therefore they can't get the benefit. Therefore, Prabhupada said, if someone practices, there's a yoga ladder. And the goal is always Krishna consciousness. But if someone gets stuck on a particular rung of the ladder and doesn't progress to Krishna consciousness, then we call that person a karma yogi, an ashtanga yogi, whatever. But the real purpose is Krishna consciousness. And if you don't understand that, you won't get the full benefit. And pranayam, controlling the breath, the real benefit, the real purpose from that Bhagavatam quote I read is to stop the mind and senses from engaging in fruitive activities. And this is described in today's shloka. Mana karma bir akshiptam. Gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead. So this is the purpose. Rules and regulations, sit properly, control the breath, and then pratyahara. Pratyahara means you're withdrawing the mind. You're bringing the mind in. You're withdrawing the mind from the external senses, from the external fruitive activities. You're withdrawing and taking away the mind from all of those things that make us entangled within material life. This is pratyahara. And this is described, again, this pratyahara, this is described at the end of yesterday's verse. Mano yached means withdrawing the mind, bringing the mind in, detaching the mind. And in today's verse, the exact same word, yached, withdrawing or is used. Niyached vishaye byokshan. Manasa buddhi sarati, that you withdraw the mind, you withdraw the intelligence. Actually, interesting, buddhi sarati, just like we've heard about this example that the soul is the passenger in the chariot, and the horses are the 5 senses, and the chariot is the body. So the intelligence, buddhi sarati, the intelligence in this example is the driver of this chariot. So the duty of this stage, pratyahara, is that by the intelligence, you withdraw the mind and the senses from the external and from the mundane engagements, the mundane attachments. So this is the start of today's verse. And then the second half is mana karma bir akshiptam subarte darayed diya. You don't just withdraw the mind. You don't just negate the mind's dealings, the mind's function, and the mind's attachments. There's also akshiptam. Akshiptam means you become fixed onto something. You become attached to something. You become engrossed in something. And what is that? Subharte darayed diya. Darayed means the process of dharana, or fixing the mind. So this pratyahara and dharana are 2 sides of the same coin. Pratyahara means you're withdrawing the mind from the material existence, and dharana means you're beginning to fix the mind on spiritual existence. Here in today's shloka, the word shubharte is used, which is interesting. Shubha arte means the most auspicious goal or the most auspicious wealth or the most auspicious thing to be gained. Prabhupada translates it very nicely. He translates Shubharte as, where is it? For the sake of the Lord. So this is the ultimate meaning, because Krishna is the most auspicious thing to be gained. Prema Pomarta Mahan. Artha Mahan means it's the same word, Artha today. Shubharta and Artha Mahan are the same thing. Krishna is the goal to be attained. Although he's not named in this verse, we understand that the mind has, after withdrawing from material senses, then the mind has to be engaged in Krishna. And again, continuing the yogic analysis, we've seen yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, and dharana. And that's up to today's shloka. In tomorrow's shloka, which of course I'll leave for tomorrow's speaker, the last two processes of dhyan and samadhi are described. And there in that verse, finally, Vishnu himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is mentioned by name. Because again, just like the Mayavadis, they'll talk yoga, they'll talk Vedanta, but they'll never say the name of the Supreme Lord. So Shukadev Goswami in tomorrow's verse is making sure we understand that Vishnu is the goal of this process. And again, after today's verse, the process finishes with dhyana or meditation and samadhi. And samadhi, like Vishwamitra and so many others, they fell down. But samadhi upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you can never fall down from that position. So this is what's being described by Srila Shukadev Goswami in today's verse and in this whole section. So I found it very interesting how he's doing that, using this Ashtanga Yoga paradigm to explain devotional service. So we may ask, why is he doing that? Or what's the point of him doing that? It's because this yoga paradigm, this yoga viewpoint and practice is a real thing. It's a genuine philosophy. It's a real thing. It's part of what's known as Saddarshan, the 6 primary bona fide philosophies of the Vedic tradition. And one of them is the mystic yoga process. And these 6 processes are actually proper bona fide processes. And the goal of all of them is attaining the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The process of Ashtanga Yoga is attaining that. Again, yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratma na shradavan bhajate yomam samyukta tamomata. This is the goal of the yogic system, and therefore the best yogi is the devotee. And there's the other Saddarshans, the yoga system, the Vaisheshika system, which is basically an analysis of the more or less gross material components of the world in order to understand the supreme absolute truth as the source of it all. The Mimamsa system, Karma Mimamsa, which is viewing the world and understanding our conditioned life through the process of fruitive activities and understanding fruitive activities and how to leave aside impious activities and take up pious activities. This is Karma Mimamsa. And again, that is also the goal is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What's that? Oh yeah, just like in the 6th chapter, Krishna says the best yogi is the devotee. So similarly, is that the 4th chapter? Yagyartat karmanonyatra loko yam karma bandhana, that the proper work, karma, so the karma mimamsa system is all about karma, performing activities. Yagyartat karmanonyatra, that all other karma should be left behind, and the only karma that should be performed is sacrifice to Vishnu, devotional service to Vishnu. Lokoyam karma bandhana. Otherwise, the whole world is simply entrapped by material fruitive activities. So same thing, that the karma mimamsa system, the goal is actually Krishna. There's Sankhya Yoga, the process of Samkhya, which is analyzing the gross and the subtle material elements. Vaisheshika philosophy also analyzes the material elements, but mostly using the the idea of atomism, that things are composed of atoms, and the atoms combine in different ways to form the different structures and elements and such. Sankhya delves into the more subtle ingredients, not just the gross ingredients, earth, water, fire, air, ether, but the subtle ingredients, mind, intelligence, ego, the tadmatras, the senses, the sense objects, all the different subtle entities and subtle concepts connected with all those. So this is Sankhya Yoga. And the third canto of the Bhagavatam, like, I don't know exactly, but like roughly half of it is Sankhya Yoga, Kapila Muni, explaining Sankhya Yoga. And his conclusion also, the conclusion of the teacher, the original teacher of Sankhya, is also devotional service. Prabhupada would sometimes say that there's Devahuti Putra Kapila, the Kapila we know from the Bhagavatam, the son of Devahuti, who taught this devotional Sankhya. And there was also an atheist Kapila, like an imposter Kapila, who taught this Sankhya, but with no reference to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we want to follow the real Kapila. And he says in the third canto, Etavan evaloke smin, pumsam nishreya sodaya, tivrena bhakti yogena, mano mayarpitam stiram. Etavan evaloke smin. Therefore, within this world, within the whole creation, pumsam nishreya sodaya, any person who wants to attain perfection, if you want any kind of perfection, or any person who wants perfection, what's the means? Tivrena bhakti yogena. The only means is very intense, very powerful, very concentrated devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What does that mean? Intense, fixed devotional service. Mano mayarpitam stiram. Mano, the mind. Mayarpitam means, like arpita is like akshipta in today's verse, that the mind completely fixed, completely devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And stiram, just like Patanjali says, stiram is how you should sit. So here, Kapila Dev is saying this is how your mind should be fixed, stiram, in a very fixed position on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So anyway, and there's others. Well, and finally, is Vedanta. And most of it, we're not concerned with the impersonalist Vedanta, the cheating Vedanta, the pseudo Vedanta. The real Vedanta is Vaishnavism. Vedanta Vedakrit Eva Chaham. Krishna says he is Vedanta. He's the goal of the Vedic knowledge, the knower and compiler of the Vedic knowledge. So that's the real Vedanta, not like the Prakashananda Saraswati version, where he could say Chaitanya, he could chant Om, Brahman, whatever, but the name Krishna could not pass his lips. He couldn't bear that. So anyway, this is the Saddarshan. And in their perfect state, in their idealized state, all of them are meant for understanding Krishna. But because they have a particular paradigm, a particular viewpoint, like the yoga system is dealing with controlling the mind and the senses. So this whole process of yoga is controlling the mind of senses. The process of Vaisheshika and Samkhya is understanding the material nature. Because if you actually truly understand the material nature, you'll understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of it. Or, I didn't mention Nyaya, or logic. That logic as a means of coming to true understanding, true knowledge of the way things are, is an extremely powerful tool. And if utilized perfectly, one will come to the conclusion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where his parts and parcels, and our dharma, our life, is meant to serve him. So all of these 6 processes of yoga are meant for coming to Krishna, but because they have a particular narrow viewpoint, they almost inevitably, people on that path become deviated. If you're on the path of yoga, almost everyone who pursues that path, they get lost in, twisting your body like a pretzel or breathing exercises or some impersonal kind of pseudo meditation. Prabhupada was once talking about these yogis, and he said, I have seen these yogis meditating before. They are simply sleeping and snoring. And then he goes like that, like making a snoring sound. It was very funny. So the process is bona fide, but the practice, because of its narrow focus and because of its indirect focus, because it doesn't from beginning to middle to end constantly say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without that, people will become deviated. Therefore, the real teachings of Bhakti Yoga from Kapila becomes corrupted into materialistic Sankhya. And the bona fide process of Nyaya, for using your intelligence and argument to understand the Supreme Lord, becomes twisted into just intellectual mind games. So this is the process, but Vedanta, the Vedanta of Bhakti Yoga, does not have that problem. From start to finish, we understand that Krishna is the goal, and we don't engage in it through some, side path that, sit properly, breathe properly, do the mind like this, the mind like that, or understand the atoms or understand karma. No, it's all because Krishna is the goal. Therefore, it's all Krishna from the very beginning. We get nothing but Krishna from our very first day in Krishna consciousness, from the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. We get nothing but Krishna. Therefore, the chance for deviation is reduced almost to nil. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga is the perfect process, over and above all these other saddarshan, which bona fide philosophies they may be, and the paradigms are useful. Understanding the nature of the mind is a useful thing to understand in performing devotional service. Therefore, in these past couple of verses, Shukadeva Goswami is giving this particular type of analysis, or Krishna does it himself in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, or Karma Mimamsa, because it generally gets degraded into simply fruitive activities, trying to get some good benefit or go to the heavenly planets. But the philosophical understanding, the philosophical framework of it is very useful. Therefore, we have 2 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita dealing with karma yoga and action in Krishna consciousness using this style of analysis. So the analysis is actually very good. But because it's not focused exclusively and completely on Krishna, it becomes deviated all the time. It becomes deviated. This is the danger of all these other processes. So wrapping up a little bit, but yet we see Krishna uses, Shukadeva Goswami is using, we use that. And there's a very interesting verse in purport early in the Bhagavatam in the 1st canto, 1st chapter, text 7. The sages are glorifying Sutta Goswami. And they're saying, oh, Sutta Goswami, you're so learned and so qualified. Why? Because you've studied Vedanta, Veda Vedam Shrestha. Veda Vedam Shrestha means you understand the topmost knowledge of the Vedas, best of all, from Bhagavan Badarayana, from which was given by Vyasadeva himself, because you've studied that and understood that. So what's Veda Vedam Shrestha? What's the best philosophy given by Vyasadeva? That's Vedanta, the Vaishnava Vedanta, or the process of Bhakti Yoga. But they continue, but you also know something else, Anyecha Munaya. Anyecha Munaya Paravara Vida. And you also understand the philosophies of other sages who are teaching other fields of knowledge or other angles of knowledge or other understandings of knowledge. So Sutta Goswami is qualified because he understands Bhakti Yoga. And besides that, he also understands the auxiliary philosophies and sages and understands that. And Prabhupada explains this in the purport. He says, besides Vyasadeva, there are other sages who are the authors of 6 different philosophical systems, namely Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Ashtavakra. Theism is explained completely in the Vedanta Sutra, Whereas in other systems of philosophical speculations, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes. One can sit on the Vyasa-san only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one can present fully the theistic views of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. So this is beautiful, that Vyasadev's teaching, Vedanta philosophy, Bhakti Yoga, especially in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, Prabhupada says, theism is explained completely in that system. But in other systems, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes. Just like, again, going back to Patanjali, Krishna is not mentioned. There's some, maybe, I think, 4 mentions of Ishwara in the Patanjali sutras. That yes, meditating on Ishwara is good, it's helpful to meditation, but certainly not the focus of the process. Certainly not the focus. Or in the Vaisheshika, I also looked up the Kannada's sutras. So just like we know Vedanta Sutra starts Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So Kannada starts his sutras as Atato Dharma Jigyasa. That now let's inquire about Dharma. And then he goes on, what is Dharma? Dharma is the knowledge in the Vedas. Why do we accept the Vedas? Because they're spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the perfect person. So he says that, but then that's almost all of it for the whole sutra process. That's the whole mention of Krishna, indirectly, not by name, is it? So this is the beauty. We have this system, Vaishnava Vedanta or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is, it has the sense and mind control of the yoga system. It has the logic and reason and philosophy of Nyaya. It has an understanding of the material nature, which equals and surpasses that of the Vaisheshikas and the Sankhya's. And it tells you how to perfectly engage in activity to completely purify and liberate yourself, better than that of the Karma Mimamsas. So this is Vaishnavism. What a gift we have. That therefore we say, the Bhagavatam says, this is the cream of Vedic knowledge. This is the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge. This is one meaning of it, that there's other fruits of Vedic knowledge, like yoga system. This is a fruit of Vedic knowledge, Karma Mimamsa, Nyaya, Sankhya. But Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit, the sweetest, most relishable, most nourishing, most perfect. And all the other cheating things are kicked out. What does cheating things mean? Again, this purport. Whereas in other systems of philosophical speculations, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes. So how fortunate we are to have this. And by having this, we automatically gain knowledge and gain the perfection of all of the saddarshan, all of the systems. Because Prabhupada also says, one can sit on the Vyasa-san only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one could present fully the theistic views of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. That doesn't mean we have to spend or waste a lot of time studying Nyaya, studying Sankhya, studying Karma, all these things. We automatically get a very good education on this from Prabhupada's purports and from the Bhagavatam itself, just like today's verse. Prabhupada is explaining so practically and so intelligently about what the yogic system is and how it relates to the system of devotional service. He says here, the first process of spiritualizing the mind by mechanical chanting of pranava omkar and by control of the breathing is technically called the yogic process of pranayama. So he's explaining we're automatically getting in education in this. And when we understand Bhagavatam philosophy, Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, and also understand Saddarshan and all these other things, then that makes us qualified to, just like that Brahmana who was trying to preach to Prakashananda Saraswati but was unable. It makes us able to meet any challenge, any physical challenge, any practical challenge to devotional service, because we understand what it is and how it's situated in relation to all of these other philosophical and Vedic systems. That gives us perfect understanding. Then when our faith is strong, and then when our knowledge is strong, I said there's the Kanishta Adhikari, there's the Madhyama Adhikari, this is the Uttama Adhikari. That person whose faith is strong, whose knowledge is strong. And not only they can never be shaken from the path of devotional service, but they're also capable of explaining it to others. So this is some of the ideas that I've gleaned from today's verse and this segment. And when we hear tomorrow's class about the dhyana and samadhi system, we can also keep this in mind and see how it all ties together. Thank you very much, everybody, for your very kind patience and attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. If there's any questions or comments or discussion, we can do that now.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mother.
If anybody has questions or if they have any comments, please just raise your hand, unmute yourself, or go ahead. I was stuck at the very beginning when you were saying about Kanishta and Madhyama Adhikaris, about faith and knowledge. I was just thinking about myself. So the faith is very strong, but the knowledge is not there. And I'm trying, but I don't know if I'm using it as an excuse but I feel I only understand so much. And I'm just going by, I don't understand, but I have faith that Prabhupada is leading us in the right path. And so I'm just going to follow it.
So that's an excellent stage. That's the Madhyama Adhikari. That's the medium qualified person. But having knowledge is not, how would I say, it's not necessarily collecting volumes and volumes and volumes of knowledge that, okay, now I used to only be able to memorize 5 shlokas. Now I can memorize 100 shlokas, so I have more knowledge. Or I could, use like Nyaya. Nyaya is one of the Sadars, and I can argue very usefully, very expertly. Some people are good arguers. They know how to use logic, or they can be convincing. So this is not what it means to have necessarily what it means. That's part of it. What it means to have strong knowledge. If you hear Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you're completely convinced of that, that's great knowledge. That's tremendous knowledge to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then if you could also remember some of the verses in relation to that, or some of the statements of Srila Prabhupada in relation to how Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then your knowledge is increasing even more and more. Sometimes just by being in this movement, actually a bhakta, a new person who comes to this movement and spends one day in the temple, his knowledge is greater than 99.9% of the whole rest of the population. What to speak of a person who's been reading for years, studying for years, and over and above that, practicing for years. We may think, oh, I'm not very knowledgeable compared to this person, that person. But such a person actually has a tremendous amount of knowledge. Because without that knowledge, it's very hard, even if, just like if the faith is strong, but there's no knowledge, that's a powerful thing in itself, that your faith is strong, you won't be turned away. But if you don't have the knowledge, if someone comes and argues with you and they're a better arguer than you are, you may become bewildered. That's why Prabhupada said, don't go to the Mayavadi Bhashya, because if you read it, you'll become a Mayavadi. So we always want to protect that, but we also can't underestimate the amount of knowledge we have. If we've been in devotional service a little while, we know a lot.
Yeah, I think with time, I can see that I know more now than I did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But I think that ability to be able to speak is where the confidence is not there.
Actually, what was it? Satsvarup Maharaj asked Srila Prabhupada very early, when Prabhupada was just starting to have his disciples sometimes give class, and Satsvarup Maharaj said that I guess he was Satsvarup at the time, not Maharaj, and maybe he was even still Steve at the time, I'm not sure. And he said, I don't really feel, confident or able to give class. And Prabhupada said, yes, when I first started, I also felt that way, but by practice, you'll be able to do it. So we can imagine if Prabhupada is saying that about himself. He was also once at least according to external vision, he was a new devotee, a new member of the Gaudiya Math, externally learning about Krishna consciousness and philosophy and such things. And at least he said of himself that he was also shy or not competent in the beginning, but he became competent. He also said famously, because I was good at hearing, therefore now I am good at chanting. So that's also part of the process. That hearing means hearing from Bhagavatam, means hearing from devotees, then automatically we'll also become good at speaking and good at preaching.
Dronacharya Prabhu has his hand up.
Yes, Drona Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Acharya Prabhu. Thank you for a great class. Really appreciate it. When I hear about Krishna consciousness compared to the different various Vedic philosophies, the yoga, the impersonalist philosophies, and we see that Krishna consciousness is the most direct way to understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's the highest philosophical realization. It leaves me with the question of, why wouldn't this be the only option? It's the simplest, it's the most direct, and it gives you the highest level of realization.
Right.
Why would the option even be there? Why would these other philosophical paths not incorporate bhakti as the goal?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. One way to look at it is that someone who actually studies the Vedas from a spiritual master, actually reading especially Vedanta and Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, for them, Bhakti Yoga is the only path. So the real understanding is that it is the only path. Why are these other things there? I don't know the rationale exactly why they did it, but basically it's to give this chance for realization and knowledge and spiritual advancement culminating in Krishna consciousness to persons who are either not able or not willing to take to that much purer, much more powerful, much more perfect, and much more direct path. Just like I mentioned the history of Dhritarashtra, he was one example that he was actually unable or unwilling to take directly to Krishna consciousness. So his brother said, okay, you go to the forest, you do like in yesterday's verse, what was that? I mean, today's verse. No, was it today's? No, text 16. Grihat pravajito dira punya tirtha jala pluta sutra vivikta asino vidivat kalpitasane. You follow the yamaniyam, you go to the holy place, you bathe in the river, you sit down and meditate. He gave that to him because it was his only hope for advancement, because he was too sinful and too offensive for too long to take directly to devotional service. So that's perhaps one reason, that it's to attract and engage certain type of people. Someone is very interested in, let's say, material advancement, that I want to perform, I want to work and get the result. So, okay, here's the process of karma yoga. You work like this, you work like this. Oh, and by the way, while you're doing it, you also have to include sacrifice to Vishnu. So it's giving a means of advancement for those who are unwilling or unqualified or unready to take to the path of devotional service. And, the sacrifices and all these things, logic, and the goal is always Krishna. but it's attractive to people who, sadly, for those who are not interested in the goal of Krishna, but by taking it up, it will give some at least some opportunity and hopefully some education, taking them to the point of understanding devotional service. And Prabhupada has described that the yogi, the person into yoga, he's coming for mystic cities or meditation or some power or long life or something like that. But if you actually follow the process, eventually the process will lead you to seeing and meditating on Krishna in the heart. And from that stage, one has more of a possibility of advancing in Krishna consciousness. So that's what I'd say, that they're bona fide processes, but they're less direct in order to facilitate and offer some opportunity to those who are not ready to take the direct path. Especially we think of things like I think this was discussed in Wednesday's Chaitanya Charitamrita reading by Vishnu Gita Prabhu, how like in previous ages, the process was meditation because it was possible and people were able to do it and come to the right conclusion. But in this age, all of that is out the window. So now, therefore, we preach very vigorously, just take up Krishna consciousness. Is that helpful? Is that illuminating at all or interesting at all?
Yeah, no, that sheds some light on it, especially if a person is too materially attached, bringing them in at a level where they can grasp. So through karma yoga, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. And like with bhakti, there's the component of surrendering your false ego. You say like you're giving up this false sense of self, and that is introduced at a very, at the kind of a very beginning. You're not your body, or this
Right.
is my, you're just, so there's a component of surrender, where you're at the, because philosophically you understand, I'm at the mercy of Krishna, I'm at the mercy, whereas these, like, for instance, like in yoga, there's this understanding of I'm advancing based on my own strength.
Right.
So there's still some sense of control of I'm the doer. And that gives understandably, like that's one of the hardest things for us to give up, is this false sense of self.
Right.
So to think that we're the doer, as you were saying that popped into my head.
Yeah.
About
that's a really great idea, really interesting idea. That's like Prabhupada, he actually talking about the yoga system, he would say this is the kitten and the baby monkey system, right? That the baby monkey has to cling on to the mother, but the kitten is just carried in the mouth by the mother. But that's not just the yoga system, that's all of the other saddarshan are not predicated upon surrender to Krishna and that understanding. So that applies to all of the other, all other philosophies really that don't accept that idea of surrender and dependence on Krishna. So yeah, that's a nice analysis. I like that. And also a lot of these things, like these reasons for these other systems, these are more valid in a universal and a historical context. Nowadays, those things are not very helpful because all those other Sad Darshan systems are all gone to hell now. And any benefit they could give is very minimal and very high risk for, rather than bringing you to Krishna consciousness, diverting you from it. So things are different today. Therefore, especially today, Krishna consciousness really is the main path we have to focus on. Yeah, thanks for that. Very, very nice ideas.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anything else? Question or discussion?
Prabhu, thank you very much. I just, the previous chapter, Krishna says, method is that one should have duly sanctified seating place made straw, deerskin, carpet. And
Right.
then he says, without offense. He prescribed the whole process is to drag the mind from material engagements and fix it on the lotus feet of the Lord. This is a simple process, they say. And in this chapter, the one today we did, but one who is unable to accommodate such personal features of the Absolute is disciplined in impersonality to train the mind to make further progress.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that addresses what John Acharya Prabhu was asking also. Nice.
Yeah. So that is one thing. And I just, from Bhagavad Gita, so we were reading that Janma Karma Chame Divyam, that one is a one. The another one I saw, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mam Upasrita Bahovo Janma Tapasya Potamad Bhavam Agatha. So that says, being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me. Many persons in the past became purified by knowledge to me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me.
Yeah.
So all these slokas, Prabhu, I have, but as I said, Tadvidi Pranipatena Pasnena Sevaya Pakshanti to Jnanam Jnaninam Tattvadarsana. So just try to learn truth, approaching a spiritual master and like that. So the self-realized souls can impart knowledge into, because they have seen the truth.
Yes.
So like you said, a lot of things, I know the slokas, but like you said, by hearting the slokas, if I can do 5, I can do 100. But when I was young, whatever I practiced the slokas, I still remember them. But at this age, I'm trying my best. Every day I'm sitting in the Bhagavatam class in the morning. First thing, I sit here. I try to read the sloka.
Right.
But that forgetfulness also Krishna is giving
Sure.
me. So what to do for that?
Yeah. Those
He
two
gets
things
me
are really
intelligent
nice.
and forget. Pardon?
I was saying those two things are very nice. Learning it in your childhood is very nice. And learning it every day in the Bhagavatam class are both really powerful things. I also, when my son was a child, we also were teaching him shlokas, reciting Bhagavad Gita, and he doesn't do it anymore. But if I ever remind him, he can do it. It comes out.
Yeah. See, if I remember the sloka, I just say it. Yeah. But now, whatever I try to remember some slokas or something, I'm not able to. I'm forgetting. Means forgetting. It's
you
there.
Remember what you can.
Not coming out. Pardon?
You remember what you can remember, and what's that? Knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness, they all come from Krishna. So if you're a devotee and you're trying to remember Krishna, Krishna will help you remember. Even if you forget a shloka, Prabhupada would sometimes forget shlokas.
I don't know, Prabhu.
You'd hear him in class and he'd say, what was that? What's that verse? And he couldn't remember, or he asked someone to help remember. So that's no disqualification.
So that's what I always pray, Krishna. Just give me the remembrance, I'm forgetting. So that's what I had the question, feeling all the time, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. It's a very nice class today. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions and for your kind attention. Everyone have a excellent day. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha
Patindobhyavcha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.